Welcome back. Thank you very much for being with us. We get good response to these videos, and we're very happy to provide them. Hope you all had a very Merry Christmas and had your wonderful Christmas celebrations. We certainly had a wonderful time being with you at our masses, and we had great viewing of the recorded masses. I think over almost 600 views of them combined together. So wonderful, and thank you so much for your understanding and support as we continue to navigate uncharted waters with this pandemic. We weren't going to do a video today, but I said, oh, it's Epiphany, we have to. And I'm glad we thought of that, because Epiphany is really a special feast day of the church. It's of the ancient baptismal days, it's one of five principal ones, three main ones, which is Easter and Pentecost, and then Epiphany in the winter for us in the Northern Hemisphere. I was telling Amy earlier that I think this developed out of a tradition of preparing people for baptism, because Epiphany, Easter, Pentecost, and Christmas and Lazarus, a day called Lazarus Saturday that we don't celebrate anymore, were days in the ancient church, especially in Constantinople, when they celebrated the sacraments of initiation. So Epiphany is a very old feast. It's much older than Christmas, and it was originally called the Theophany. And Theophany is a word that means a physical manifestation of God in the world. And you can think of Moses and the burning bush and stuff like that. But Jesus himself becomes the greatest theophany, the great theophany, the great manifestation of God on this earth. So it's well named as the Theophany. Epiphany is also a beautiful name for the day. And Epiphany, I mentioned in the homily on Christmas, I was talking about those those stories of A Christmas Carol and how the Grinch stole Christmas, that those characters have epiphanies in them. And it's a wonderful word. It's a complete shifting around of a person's knowledge based on a kind of an immediate event or receiving some great insight. And the world has had its epiphany on Epiphany, so to speak, that God entering history has changed it, turned it around, and made it into something different. So we're going to have Amy read the reading for Epiphany Sunday, which we're celebrating on Sunday the 3rd of January this year.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising, and have come to do him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it has been written through the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, since from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod called the Magi secretly and ascertained from them the time of the star's appearance. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the child. When you have found him, bring me word, that I too may go and do him homage." After their audience with the king, they set out. And behold, the star that they had seen at its rising preceded them, until it came and stopped over the place where the child was. They were overjoyed at seeing the star, and on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. They prostrated themselves and did him homage. Then they opened their treasures and offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed for their country by another way. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. This morning today is the feast day of the Holy Innocents, which is, in among our traditions is a horrible commemoration in some sense, that Herod, when Jesus was a baby, to avoid the confrontation or the threat to his power, to get rid of it, orders the killing of all of the boys under the age of 2 in and around Bethlehem. And in a dream, again like today's reading, Joseph is told, send your family, take your family to Egypt, and they escape. But I mentioned during the homily this morning that Herod was a man who really suffered from a couple of fallacy, a way of looking at things that was only about him. It was very self-centered. And human beings today, although very few engage in that kind of horrible action that Herod engages in his life, but people today, we suffer with some of the same kind of a thing, where we get into our own thing, where what I think is the only thing that is the only world I know. Not to make this a very long story, but it's called a sharpshooter fallacy, and the fallacy goes that as a famous sharpshooter who was really known as an excellent marksman, and everyone looks at the barn where he practices, and they don't see any shots outside of the bullseye. And the idea is that as they inquire more and learn more about how he became a great shot, they realize he shot at the barn first and then put the bullseye on after. And this is a very common problem in academic circles, mostly because you have a person who figures out what they know and what they like, and then they don't read anything outside of that. They don't see anything outside of their own circle. And this gives a great illusion of mastery. And when you talk to a person like this, it's fruitless. It's just you don't get nowhere, because they're a master of the little bit that they know, and trying to introduce a new information will just bounce off of them like a tennis ball off a concrete wall. St. Thomas Aquinas presented this in a different way by saying, beware of the man who's only read one book. And I was Googling this a little earlier, and I found an article by it was rather funny article about this situation, and they gave you tips on dealing with people who are like this. And they said, when you meet a person like this, change the conversation as often as possible, and you might even want to pretend you have an invisible friend who's calling for you in the corner, because it's a really difficult conversation to be in when you meet people like this. And the world, unfortunately, has is full of them. But the idea is, with Epiphany, is that we are broken out of that by the gospel. That God coming into history really takes a hammer and a chisel to that kind of a thing. That we need to really embrace a very rich and wonderful view of the world. We have to be students of it in some sense, like Aquinas was himself, always beginning his great thinking with the objections to what he's going to say, or what he thinks, or what he's saying. In this reading, you have 3 gifts given from 3 earthly kings who are acknowledging this child, that something special has happened in the world. And those gifts begin to show how special that child is. Now, the gifts are not random. They're a gift richly given, and gold is what you offer a king. So the symbolism there is that this child will be a king. It's strange gifts to give a child, because the symbolism is so wonderful as to lead you. No, we're giving this to Jesus Christ. We're giving this to the Son of God. We're giving this to the true King, and that's why gold is offered, because this is the King, and we need to acknowledge that. And then frankincense is what you would give a priest, and Jesus Christ is the great high priest, as we call him. And in fact, you hear people talk about the priesthood. It's not the priesthood mine, it's not Father Michael's priesthood, it's the priesthood of all of us that we share with Jesus Christ by virtue of our baptism. And incense is a symbol that this man is going to be the priest. And also myrrh is something that you give somebody who's going to be embalmed, someone who's going to die. So he's also priest and victim. He's also going to die. And the symbolism there is that this child is going to be sacrificed in some sense for us, even though he is a priest and a king. And this rich symbolism gives us right away in the beginning of Matthew's gospel an extremely rich view of our faith. It's never one book. It's the greatest story ever told. There was a movie called that about Jesus. The greatest story ever told, and it's big, it's broad, and it takes in every human personality, not just the ones who fit this kind of thing, or this kind of thing, or this kind of thing, or this kind of thing, but everyone. And Jesus spends his life proclaiming that his own saving love and saving action is for all. Not all will explicitly be part of it, but implicitly, everyone is maybe a member of this great story that we share. Which is why he teaches us not to judge and not to do all of these other things. But Epiphany, the hope and prayer is that we will be broken out of any small view of the others in our lives and of the people around us, that we be broken out, especially out of an earthly one. And it could be anything. It can be an academic one, like I've already said. It can be a political view. It can be anything. These kind of small things tend to make us very ugly. They tend to make us tyrants in our own lives, and that fullness, which sometimes we fear, is really what does a lot to save us. So, for Epiphany, I would ask you to really pray for one. There's not a person in the world who can't benefit from more insight into the life we share together. There's not a person in the world who should say to God, I don't need that grace. We might want to avoid it, but we certainly need it. And those graces that came even in the stories that I mentioned in Christmas Eve Mass of Ebenezer Scrooge and the Grinch, may they really be bestowed on us all, so that we may become rich in those three aspects that we share in Jesus Christ. We begin with the death, but we also begin with this royal priesthood that we are called to by being made one with him in his baptism. And may that be a rich and wonderful blessing in 2021 for us to contemplate and live out in our life, that we are called to so much. And as you look at the world, as you draw in the beautiful things, as you draw in the challenges, remember God is right there, and every day do your best to see him, to see the grace working in the small and the large alike, and you will find yourself just as richly blessed as the Christ child was with the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So I offer you that today. Continue to be vigilant and brave, knowing that we're all praying for you together as you're out there. And thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for being so patient and willing to endure this together as we navigate these uncharted waters. But again, I can't say anything more than thank you so much, and have a great 2021. Take care.